and welcome to Stampscaping 101. We're going to do some stamp sketches with nature sheet number 23 here. Now this is what I always recommend to people when they get their new stamps, and especially if you're new to scenic stamping in general. Stamp sketches, or the process of it, it's just kind of familiarizing yourself with a given image in relation to how you'll be using it in different configurations, compositions, etc. Not so much on kind of the techniques that you'll be using with it, but this is something that I have to do too whenever I get new stamps. Now, these aren't new stamps for me, but it's just kind of a new configuration of some existing designs in set form. All right, so this set right here, and these stamps can be used with any other Stampscape stamps too. I probably wouldn't use it with tropical or something like that, but with just about any other stamp you can use them. Okay, so how do you approach doing scenic stamping in general? Well, by and large, I mean, you can work whatever way you want. You can do foreground things first, midground, background. You can just use stamps individually and put a quote around them or something like that. I mean, there's all kinds of different ways. But the thing that often confuses people that are new to scenic stamping, that are kind of coming from kind of isolated imagery, but they're used to composing it with other things like word stamps and whatnot, embellishments around the image. It's how to combine things in a seamless fashion that scenic stamping is kind of all about. It's about this seamless integration of separate components to make a variety of compositions using the same stamps, okay? You don't have to do the same exact thing with the same imagery every time, okay? All right, so that being said, it's just on a scene like this, we have two different main images, okay? And that would be the covered bridge, the larger and smaller sizes, okay? So those are the easiest ways to start. Okay, now I'm just going to be doing this on some both matte and some glossy cardstock, because on these stamp sketches you can use them later to, it's not just an exercise. You can use these compositions that you do on here to finish off, to make complete cards. Okay, now the easiest way for something like this is a very large stamp. So okay, now right down here there's this road coming out. Okay, covered bridge, we have this road coming out. So that being said, if I stamp it higher in the composition, okay, let's do that. We'll have more road down here, so we'll have to continue the road somehow, and I'll show you the imagery to do that with. Okay, now there's a lot of surface area on this stamp. I have, a decent amount of padding underneath my stamp. Yeah, I don't know, I could use a few more. There's like 3 sheets of copy paper. But I also stand up and I press the middle of the stamp, the sides, top, bottom, and I usually do it a few times. It just depends how smooth the surface of your your paper is. All right. So see this right here? So now we have this road coming out at this angle right here. Okay. Now let's just do another one so we have more sky. Let me do that. This one was on some silk paper. And let's do this one vertical too. Okay, we'll do some landscape as well as portrait. I mean, you can do this on, if you have like a piece of round paper or something like that, you can do that. Square, stamp board, small pieces, whatever. Okay, so that's stamped high. Okay, we're going to have very little sky in something like that. You can stamp it low. Let's go to the other extreme. Let's have this coming off the bottom of the paper. And let's say you're doing something and you want to make some kind of statement with your sky. You can put lightning, clouds, just some textures in the background, blue sky, could be anything. And of course we're doing this on white. On this one right here I did it on dark blue paper, okay? And that was on the previous video, if you're interested in that. Alright, so now we have 2 different types of focus points, I guess. Well, I don't know. I guess the focus point is going to be the covered bridge, of course, on either one of these. Anytime you have kind of a structure or anything kind of, humanity related, I don't know, it tends to be the focal point in the scene. But what I'm getting at is, I guess the filler area is going to be the focus of these two different configurations right here. On this one right here, we just have more sky or something like that. I can put an overhang of branches up here, and they'll play a much more prominent role. Like in this one right here, there's a lot of sky, so I have the hanging branches and leaves right in here. Okay. And so the other imagery in this set will be, well, I tell you what, let's just start with the focal points first. Okay, I have two different large scenes here. Let's stamp the smaller one as well, and then we'll get into the follow-up filler imagery to be used with it. Okay, here's the smaller one. I would say it's roughly about 50% of the larger one, okay? Whenever these designs are drawn, if there's two different size versions of it, it's always, the original is always going to be, let me put this on the other side of this block here. This is going to hang off my block a little bit, but I don't know, no big deal. It should stamp out, as long as it's not hanging out like a 1/4 inch or something like that. I don't know, we'll see. I hope it stamps out. If it doesn't, then so be it. I just don't want to take the time to take this one and put it on my larger block. Okay, so let's get into another one right here. This is my matte paper. Okay, and let's just go about midway. Okay, a lot of people do that. So you have kind of equal sky and as well as kind of foreground. All right. I love the way they stamp out here on this this paper. And let's go with horizontal here. Now this one right here, when you're using smaller imagery like this, you can really make a statement on something like skies or something like this by stamping it really low down here. Let's say, you have a quote or something, starry skies or nighttime skies. You want to put, I don't know, whatever blues up here with, a few crystals like I like to do. When you're doing something like that, maybe you want to feature more of that given area, so you stamp it a lot lower. So on a smaller imagery like this, of course, we'll have a lot more sky up there. It almost becomes kind of a secondary visual within a scene when you feature so much sky area. There's a lot of emotions that skies can, I don't know, kind of bring about. Okay, let's go with, I can go way over here. Sometimes for visual lead-ins, I like to stamp my imagery kind of in that rule of thirds area. You can do whatever you want. You can do kind of a more kind of a balanced in terms of space impression of these images, or you can kind of go rule of thirds. The rule of thirds, you can divide something up and kind of place that in there. You divide it up that way too, but anyways, I probably wouldn't put this bridge right here, way over here. Usually, I usually have it kind of, plenty of space in the scene. Otherwise, it will kind of look like, like that. Yeah. Oh, you could, and if you're making some kind of, I don't know, compositional statement or whatnot, or you just have something very large to place, and you need to move that over. Okay, so that being said, oh, I should do something else too. Let's do something like this. A lot of people, when you're new to scenic stamping, you think that you have to use the whole image every time you stamp something out. Let me get a small kind of embellishment. Let me see if I have any stamp board right on my table. I should pause my video. I'm just going to grab a quick board here. Okay, 2 by 2 inch piece of stamp board, right? Okay. Now this is kind of an extreme example of this. We have this inked up right here, And look how great this looks, this image, on a 2x2 inch piece. You wouldn't think to use kind of a 2x3 or even a, I don't know, whatever this is, 3.5 by maybe 4 inch stamp. I could just stamp this out like this and kind of grab a portion, you know, of these images in here, okay? So we'll take this. This is a hardboard panel. If you're curious about that, you can look up other videos on this channel here. But we just take this. Now, when I'm working with a smaller piece than the stamp, I like to go tile to stamp. I wouldn't necessarily take a piece of little small paper, but these are hardboard panels, so it's just easy to stamp like this. And look at this. We have this little piece like this, okay? Now, you can do all kinds of different things with the stamp board because it's a hardboard panel, okay? You know, you can color on here with whatever media you want, and then you can turn these into magnets, pins, and it can even be an embellishment. Let's say we color this and just do the background in black and white. That's one of those typical things you do. And then you place this right on the top there, so you get this three-dimensional kind of raised embellishment. They used to refer to that as spotlighting. But whatever you call it, you know, you can use smaller pieces like that. And I can also put, you'll see what I do on these ones right here to finish them off, but you can also do, you know, some overhanging tree branches, or if you have the reed stamp that I like to use, you know, not in this set, but other Stampscape stuff. On here, you can put that on here too. And it can be a complete scene in terms of foreground, background, midground, whatever, colors and whatnot, okay? All right, so that looks pretty good on there. Okay, now that's just kind of an aside. Of course, you can always use, you know, just this. You can stamp something like that and say happy birthday up here and color this in with whatever, you know, colored pencils, chalks, pastels, whatever. But going back to that idea of the integration of other types of imagery to fill out your composition, let's get on with that. Okay, now this is the maple pear tops. I've been using this maple tree with this design a lot in my individual stamps. This is upside down on here because I had to fit it on the plate. I couldn't fit it like this. So let's take that, okay? When I've been using this maple tree in the past, maple pear, with this imagery, I've typically just been using the top, and you can certainly use that if you already have the design or whatnot. Just don't use the top. Okay, so this is one of those filler types of images, okay? So let's say on here, if I want to continue these trees out to the side, I'm going to take this and watch this. We're not going to be doing, I don't think I'm going to be doing any masking at all on here. What I like to do is I like to take that. Now, if you want to do a little bit of an extra technique here to help kind of seamlessly integrate things kind of in a little bit more of a graceful fashion, what you do is filler stamps, you kind of wipe off the edge a little bit, okay? You don't try to take off all the ink, but you just dampen it so that the edges stamp it a little bit more softly. Now what I'm going to do on here, I don't want to take this black impression right here and stamp it right into my bridge. Okay, but you can go right into your other trees. Okay, you see that right there? Now re-ink, you know, in between impressions. Okay, I'm going into them a 1/2 inch or a 1/4 inch. Okay, and see that fills out that edge. Okay, from this is going kind of from side to side, but you know, there's changes in elevation. There's hills and things like that. You can take this too, and go right over the top, and look at that. Look how seamless that image blends in. I'll show you what it looks like here, okay? So you see how I'm really filling this area out. Here's the other one right here. See how that fills out right there? Okay? So you can build it up as much as you want. Let's say there's a whole hill behind there. You can fill it in, you know, which you can do. Now, one of the things you can do is you can change the angle. Don't go 90 degrees or something like that, but sometimes I just change it a little bit. It shouldn't read as the same image, okay, if you just stamp it straight across, but I like to do little variations like this occasionally. You can just leave that as is like that, so there's a little bit of a change in height, or, just for the sake of, this video here, I just want to show you a little bit more integration here. Okay, let's go to an angle like that. All right, so see how that really filled in all that area in there. Now, if you want to do something too, you can also put this down here and have some foreground trees down here. They would probably be a little bit larger, but it could just be a small bush or a small, I don't know, not sapling, but kind of a young tree down here that's growing, or it could just represent some other type of bush, okay? So you can use this tree in the background for trees, foreground for bush, or just a small, version of that tree. Okay, well, so let's move on from that, or let's keep, filling in here with this idea in mind, okay? Now see, I'm not wiping it off. You don't have to do that, but it does kind of make it a little bit more graceful. If you're using like a really thick pigment ink or something like that, where it's going to really stamp out. Now, when you stamp these out, just a nice, even impression. Don't rock it like that to make the edges like super kind of extreme, okay? But see this where I'm filling it in? We had this whole area out here to fill in. If there's another row of trees out there, you don't have to do that. Maybe there's something else out there, okay? So this where I'm just filling it in like so. I went here, here. I don't, you can put, if you want to kind of round it up a little bit more, you can do that. But look at that whole forest of trees back there just using those treetops. All right, now, that's the smaller one, right? The smaller one, you're bound to have kind of more areas to fill in with the larger stamp. That's one of the beauties if you're working kind of on a standard quarter-size page right here. It fills in from edge to edge, especially if you're doing it in portrait mode. If I was doing it in landscape like this, I might have a little bit of space on each side, okay? So on these, this one I stamped kind of low to have more sky area up there. So why, if I'm doing that for that purpose, then I probably don't want to fill in with more trees because I'm closing in on that whole idea of trees, sky up there. On this one right here, I have very little sky. Okay, but let me just use this just for the sake of doing it. I would probably leave that so I have a little bit more space for sky instead of this little tiny peekaboo area out here. Well, I guess this is a peekaboo too, but let's just use that just so you know that, this image can be blended in, with the larger stamps too, the larger main image. So say I put one right here, one right over here. You can see the difference right here. Okay, so anyways, filler stamps, okay? So we went filler stamps as far as the main images on here. It had trees, okay? Now you see this kind of grassy area down here alongside this road. This road kind of bends around. It's coming this way. But I stamped it high enough to where this area out here is, bare down here. So we need to continue our roads on this one, and this one. On this one right here, we stamped it low, so we don't have to do that, okay? So let's take, let's get rid of this tree right here. And I have a small version of the sedge filler stamp, okay? It's just a little bit of a grassy texture, okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, let's test it out first, get an idea of what you're going to be working with, okay? And let's fill in and let's define the rest of this road. Okay, so here's what it's kind of coming out around this way. This is the edge of the road, so I'm going to come out this way roughly, okay? Because things kind of come out into perspective, so they kind of widen out a little bit. So I'll show you how easy this is to do. Just take this like this, overlap one impression with the other, okay? Don't see these as using like a puzzle or something like that that has to be perfectly integrated, okay? Now on something like this, there's not as much solid area as like our main image, okay? So don't squash this like this, okay? See how harsh that looks as opposed to that? So light even pressure, you don't have to be, delicate with it or anything like that. It's just going like that. All right. So go like this. You can change the angle too. In fact, it's even better if you do. And you get this whole area filled in like so. Okay. Now this is going to be integrated a lot more. Okay. I don't like that kind of angle of it too much, but I know what's coming up, so I know it doesn't matter. Okay, now this is the smaller version, okay? And we have this area in the background too, so I'm going to fill in that area as well. Now I went with kind of more of an angled, like, movement like that, but you can just go like, you know, horizontal too, like about like this. And you can also define your road by that a little bit. And I'll go a little bit of an angle like that. But do you see how that road goes down here again? See this right here? It's like that. All right. Now see, that doesn't match up perfectly, but who cares, because we're going to be filling in. You're just going for some additional texture. And plus I have this rock stamp that we'll use. All right. So here's this area on this one. I have this area right here, and kind of just a little bit of the road right here. All right, so everything's going to be a little bit different depending on your configuration. Now let's say if I'm going to put a deer down here or something like this, and I want kind of a lighter impression, then I'll blot it off a little bit. So do you see how much darker these ones are than this one? See how light that is? You know, so you have to plan ahead a little bit. I mean, you could do you know, something that dark, and you know, you can stamp at your whatever your image is down there, and it'll be fine. But see, this too, I can just go for multiple impressions of the same inking here too. This isn't delicate stamping by any means. This is maskless, overlapping, non stamp positioner needed stamping here, okay? But this is also where people find a lot of times they think it's harder to do that, you know, than like a puzzle. They're just not used to overlapping things and being less kind of specific when in terms of your placement, okay, of images, okay? So when they think it, you know, like scenic stamping is hard, it's not really hard but it's what they've been kind of programmed to do with certain types of stamping. You know, outline images, you can't do this with, otherwise you're going to have all these outline linear designs going into one another. These are tonal designs, so you just overlap everything, and it comes together. Let's stay with our little texturizing, okay? All right, this is a little stamp of some rocks here, okay? All right, it's just a little texture, all right? Now let's look at this imagery right here. See this little, I have little rocks in the design here, okay? So we're going to take this one. This one represents more of a kind of a foreground rock, you know, because I have the smaller ones in the design already, okay? So we'll take some of this and we'll just kind of put some additional rocks, textures down here. I'm not going for a full impression sometimes. Sometimes I'm just going for, you know, kind of ghosting of the image, okay? So here we go. There we go. See that? There's very light impressions down here as well. So you integrate it. You stamp some darker ones, and then you can stamp some lighter ones in there too. Depends on how wet your ink pad is, as far as how dark that'll stamp out. Okay. We can use some additional textures down here. See, it looks too bare without that. This is supposed to be kind of a dirt road. So I'll take this. You can even blot it off first, okay? Get a feel for it. See that right there? Integrate it into it. Don't just stop right there where the other textures ends. And you're, you know, starting these darker ones. And you can even go with a couple rocks like this. See, I'm kind of just lightly, delicately, going for a couple of the ones on the side, so you don't have to go like this every time. You can go like this, and you're just kind of utilizing it for the texture. Look how kind of more natural that looks. And you have that right down here. Okay, now here's the thing too. I like to have some rocks in my grassy area, so I'll put some of that texture around in there like so, okay? Like that. And again, it's what I have in this grassy area too. It's not just grass, but there's rocks interspersed in there. So you're just reiterating the same type of thing, okay? On this one right here, the road ends. We don't need to do anything on this one down here because I didn't extend it out, okay? All right, let's get some of the textures going in here. This one has quite a bit, actually. In reality, maybe that rock right there is a little bit too big. Maybe someone, some road maintenance, they need to get in there and kind of take care of that. Okay, let's see that. Look at the different values and hue in there. Okay, and it doesn't look like the same image was stamped out multiple times because I've just used it in different values and I've used different portions of it. All right, so that is that. That's a little filler stamp as well. That's kind of a textural filler. And here's this little snowy twigs here. I like to have some of this in my grassy areas. Let me use a mask on this one right here. Go like this, and I'll kind of put some little bushes in here. I like to break up the monotony of certain types of textures. So like that, say that sedge filler out here. See how this kind of breaks up that a little bit by having these kind of little craggy twigs coming out of this area right here. Here's with and here's without. Okay, so this it's kind of a little monotonous right there, but on this one right here, you have these little twigs sticking out. This one has a little bit more space in here, so I tell you what, let's use. Here's a minute type of little detail. You can use a little bit more of this one here in the foreground. See that? I used a little bit more. You can use the whole thing too, but this is kind of sticking out of grass, so I usually don't have the I usually don't have the base of it showing, so I'll go like this, like as if it's in grass. So what you could do is you could stamp out like this portion of it in the foreground, and as you move on from the background, you can use kind of a smaller portion. So that will kind of give you the feeling of distance as well, because you're using the same kind of element, but just it looks smaller in the background. So that's one of those little tiny details, okay? Let me show you what that looks like right here. See, I used a larger portion off the top. So, not exactly. I'm not measuring it or something like that. But here it is right here. But here's these smaller bits of it right here, here, and here. So doesn't that look like larger, medium, small? Or just larger, small, around it. But the larger one's right here. If you mistakenly stamp a much larger one in the background, that's just a larger bush or something. So it's not going to matter. But you could utilize imagery like that to kind of represent depth. Okay, so that is that. Let me get a couple more of these, and I'll show you how fast this goes. Okay, here's this whole little field right here, like this. Again, don't light even impression. Don't go like this. I'll show you the difference. So, between that impression and this one. Okay. When you get down these small images, you have to use just light, even pressure. You have to adjust your pressure. I say that because, when we're stamping like a large stamp, you're standing up and, putting a lot of pressure, left, center, right, top, bottom, etc. Is that a little bush in there? What it did to this field? Okay. But yeah, you're using a lot of pressure like this. It's pressure distributed amongst the, whatever per area. And when you press on this, if you use the same amount of pressure, it's getting condensed into just that small amount of space. So just be, conscious of that when you do that. All right, so we have that. let's get into some foreground. I mean, these are fine just as is, but I like using foregrounds in my scenes. Now I've included the leaves and leaf hanging stamp right here. Okay. All right. Just as a maple tree, you know, top can be used in the background, you can use those in the foreground. Same thing with something like this. This is mostly foreground. I can use it as an overhang or as a bush, though, is what I'm getting at. You can use it for different purposes. Now, if I'm doing this, this covered bridge scene is really conducive for spring, you know, fall types of colors. You can do these in reds and whatever. If I'm doing foregrounds like this, like these leaves right here, I can color them in fall colors if this is going to be, you know, a fall colored scene, okay? So I wouldn't just necessarily just only do things in black, okay? You know, you can hit these and they'll just inherently stamp out in that fall color, all right? Whatever you're doing, or spring, you know, you can color these green. I do them kind of in a darker green or multi-value, but let's take a look and just, you know, these are stamp sketches, so, you know, I mean, you can finish these off still in fall colors, and you can have these kind of in the shadows like this, but, okay. Like that. See, I did it even in multiple tones like that, so see, you can get that. That branch right there looks like it's farther back than this one, right? All right, so see that right there? Nice canopy of leaves and so on and so forth. Let's use this. Let's say there's like a foreground bush right next to us, you know, or a very small tree. Let's use this in the foreground, like this, okay? See how it kind of frames things off like that? All right, so one composition down. And like I said, you know, it's good to kind of integrate your other imagery. This one right here has very little space for an overhang. I probably don't want to go too busy. See, it's all, you know, dark and with a lot of texture in there. If I stamp this over it, you can do that, but, you know, it's going to really, you won't be able to see this enough if I stamp it on there. Now, if I color this in, you know, nighttime types of tones, dark blues and navy blues and whatnot, dark black, and you want to make kind of a statement on cool weather or winter, and you emboss this in white over a dark background, that would look cool and that would really stand out. But black against black like that, in this area, too much. I have a little bit of space right there. I could stamp that out, but it's very little space. Okay, so what I'm getting at was what I was talking about down here. We have a lot of open space down here, and I like to push depth in my scenes, so I'm going to put this right in here and just say it's, you know, some sort of bush or whatnot. Well, look at that foreground right here now, and it really frames off this bottom portion. You can bring a little bit more kind of balance to the piece with a little bit more, you know, bush over here, that, right? Or you can put one over here, wherever you want it to go. All right, now that's the leaves. Okay. Well, here, let's do this something right here. Let's use the leaves and the leaves hanging in a different configuration right here. Let's do this one down here. Okay. Is that foreground right there? Landscape photographers, whenever they're taking a photograph of something, some kind of subject matter, not if it's real close to your like portrait, but often what they do is they kind of position themselves where there's something in the foreground and looking back at this covered bridge, or if they're photographing a mountain or something like that in the background, they usually position something in the foreground like that. It pushes depth, and it increases the not the depth of field, but the field of view, okay? And it just it fills out the imagery a lot more from a compositional standpoint. Okay, these are leaves hanging. These are a little bit more of a, you know, kind of a different spirit here, kind of drooping, hanging down, like so. I like to leave a little bit of space open. You can close it off up there, but oftentimes I like to leave a little bit of space in there. Maybe not that much space here. Let me go with a smaller one. See that right there? I just used, I don't know, like 3 leaves off the tip of that one right here. So again, this looks like, I don't know, just a total statement. It doesn't look like this has been used, whatever, was it 5 or 6 times or something like that. We want to eradicate the, kind of the feeling that something has been used multiple times. We want it to look like their own thing, like that's its own branch over there, you know. Not so much the same. Okay, now one of the things too, these are just stamp sketches again. But on something like this, where I've just stamped out the main image, I could do my coloring in sometimes and whatnot, and then at that point in time, stamp my foreground. That's often something that I like to do because I feel like I get the most crisp impressions. Or I might like to go with like a pigment ink on this one, you know, like a VersaFine Clair or something like that, something really dark and beautiful and you know, kind of thicker inks too. And I like to do that at the tail end. You know, if I'm going to be blending in like dye-based inks or something like this, then you wouldn't blend over like a pigment ink or something like that, because it might kind of smear it and, you know, run it around a little bit, or it just might look a little bit less sharp. Okay. So that's what, you know, you can do your foregrounds at that point in time. But see that right there, how that kind of frames off the top like that? And, you know, there's still room in here for whatever you want to do. You know, lightning, cloud, sun, whatever. Blue sky, whatever, you know, something like that. But here's just a real simple composition right here. 2 stamps. This is perfect, too, for like a word stamp in here. You've kind of framed off whatever type of thing you want to put in here. You could put nothing, or you could put like a bird in here or something like that. Whatever you want to do. There's still plenty of opportunities for a lot of variation with this. Just depending on color, imagery in here, focal point. If I put a little bird in here, it would become the focal point of the scene. Probably even more dominant than the covered bridge as a focal element. If I put like people walking right here, they would become kind of the focal point of this scene right here. But let's take a look at this and let's see what we did in terms of our stamp sketches here, okay? Now this is just staying within, you know, the confines of this one set as well, okay? Where did my stamp board tile go? Here we go. Okay, something like this. Oh, okay, hey, I was talking about adding foreground. Let's do something on this right here, okay? Here, I just happen to have this one still on the acrylic, so let's just do it with this, okay? I'll put these little hanging little elements, and you can see how having, you know, this one here, see those leaves right here in the foreground? And this one, you can have it, you know, a little bit of a bush coming in here. I think that would be too much. This is 2 by 2, but I just used a little bit of this here, 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 you know, just that little tip right there, to create a little bit of a kind of a frame and foreground. We've pushed depth suddenly by having something that's, oh, I don't know, 4 feet from you to, you know, that covered bridge back there is the focal point. So you really extended or expanded on the field of view within the piece. All right, so anyway, let's take a look at these. Things are fairly similar looking, but we've filled in different configurations right here. This one was a smaller one, stamped really far to the side, so we had a lot of space here to fill in. Okay, now, from a textual standpoint, there's a lot of things going on right here, but I would define this road a lot more with, say, some green grass and brown road or something like that. When you do this, kind of work very lightly. You can do it with colored pencil or whatever. If not on the glossy cardstock. Glossy cardstock's not going to be good with pastels and chalks and, you know, colored pencil or something like that. But kind of the matte one you can. Okay, so you just define the edge right here. I'll show you what I did on this one right here. This one's just using only black and white, but see, I've kind of, this stamp ended right here. This is the larger one, and I've extended the road, just like I showed you on the quarter page, but I've really defined the road with the use of that white. And see that those textures down there with the rocks over here. You can see those little textures in here. See how they're more subtle. Oh, there's that bush right here, that craggy little bush. And here's that foreground down here again. But look at this, when we kind of look at it at arm's distance, you don't realize all those little textures are in there, right? But, you know, this might be the distance that someone views it at, you know, when they're holding it up, looking at, you know, looking at your card and whatnot. All right, so anyways, filling in like that, stamp it wherever you want it to go. I would start with your larger images. See, on something like this, I wouldn't necessarily fill in. Okay, I'm going to start stamping my, you know, sedge filler and rocks in here, you know. And then, you know, take your large image and stamp it in there. It's just easier to work around small images around the large. Just think about your, like you're packing a grocery bag or something like that, you know. In some ways, you're talking about, you know, instead of like physical weight, you're talking about visual weight, something, you know, kind of larger like that in there, and it's easier to fill in your smaller little, you know, filler imagery around it, like so, okay? Main image, filler, and then foreground. It doesn't always have to go that way again, but when you're starting off, that's just simply the easiest way to do it, I feel. You can even do it main image, filler, coloring, and then foreground at the end. Sometimes I like to wait to put in my foreground. What do I have going on in the background? Maybe I don't want so much filler image, or foreground image, I should say, because I might be covering it up. Where if you stamp the foreground before, then you're kind of, you know, configuring whatever you're going on in the background around that foreground. Sometimes I like to, I don't know, foreground for me is often not an afterthought, but kind of the last consideration, because it's somewhat the most malleable. Not that, you know, on something like this, see, I'm limited in terms of my sky visuals in here. Now, if I put like a little full moon in the background like that, that's really going to stand out. You know, like something like this, you know, in here. But, you know, in terms of space, there's not a whole lot of space in there. But, okay, again, we can finish these off in whatever color scheme, whatever time of day you want to do. I can't change a matte piece of paper and suddenly change it into a foil piece of paper like this one right here, you know. But as far as colors and everything like that, season, time of day, it's still wide open for your consideration. Yeah, if this is dead of winter, you wouldn't have the leaves on there, but anytime I do kind of a blue, kind of wintry type of scene, like this one right here, you know, I have these little specks of snow in here, but it's a little dusting of kind of an early, or I don't know, early snowfall or something like that. Dead of winter, maybe I would stamp out a different image, or I'd use bare branch or some kind of bare branch in there instead. All right, integrate these with other types of images, intersperse your evergreen trees in here. If you have pine trees, you can do pine tree and deciduous in the foreground, you know, or something like that, just to change up your variety. And people on the road, birds in the sky, different types of sky imagery in here. But just in terms of just this set alone, there's a lot of different things you can do with it, and we've only stamped it on pieces of white paper, okay? There's all kinds of other papers you can do. That if you use these imagery on that paper, you know, that's going to look a lot different on red foil than on white paper, but the white paper is going to give you the most amount of options in terms of your color schemes, of course. Okay, so anyway, stamp sketches. It's a good way to approach things and kind of get the feel for your imagery. Like I said, if you stamp something too smudgy, or, you know, you stamp that sedge filler and you smashed it down, even at that, that's going to stand out a little bit at this stage right here, but you're going to bring in all these other colors anyways. Other types of media, embellishments and whatnot, and it all blends in together in the end. Or if it keeps standing out a little bit, develop your technique to kind of, minimize the visual impact of some area that you don't like. I do this on mine all the time, and I don't know, you come up with your best techniques in the process. Okay, so anyways, if you have any questions, drop me a note in the comment section. I hope you like, share, and subscribe. And thanks as always for tuning into the Stampscapes channel.